Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra Kuf Mem Ches, Bava Basra 148. Today's daf is dedicated for a Shmira for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. In this Eis Torah, we're going to start on Kuf Mem Ches, Amud Aleph, around 7 lines from the top, where the Gemara asks the question, So there's completely different ways to read this Gemara based upon the text that we have. Based upon the Girsa, Tosfos 3 understands this to be that this is just referring to a regular gift of a healthy person, and it relates to the question of whether or not you could give something that is not yet in the world. But we're going to read it using the Rashbam's approach, because basically the whole Masechta we've been using the Rashbam's approach, so why leave him now? And the Rashbam understands that this is a continuation of the topic that we've been discussing, which is a shliv a person who gives a gift while he's very sick. And this shliv if he gives everything over, then if he recovers, he gets it back, because it was clearly just intended as a shliv gift. He only gave it because he thought he was sick. But if he gave only a portion of it, then it's going to be considered like an irreversible gift, even if he recovers, because there his intent was to give it as a gift, because he kept some back for himself. So the laws of Shlimra don't apply. So now in this case, the dekel echad, he gives the palm tree to one person, uperosa v'acher, and he gives the fruits of the palm tree to another person, mahu. What's going to be the law there? Now, the understanding is when you give a palm tree, you're not giving the fruits. So in this case, when he gives the palm tree to one person and the fruits to another person, mishir makom perio oshir is the understanding that he had kept for himself the place of the fruits, and so therefore it was not a complete gift. It was not a matanas shlimera, because he kept something for himself, and so even if he recovers, he will not be able to get the palm tree back. Or do we not say that? Or do we say, no, he gave the entire palm tree away? Now, let's say, imtim salomar la'achar lo avishir, if you want to even say that if he gave it to somebody else, that's not going to be considered like you left anything over. La'atzmo, let's say he kept the fruits for himself. You have to, according to Rashbam, you have to take out the words chutz mi peirosav. So let's say he said, I'm giving you the palm tree and I'm giving the fruits to myself. What would be the law there? So in that case, Amarav Nachman, Imtim Tzelomer. So Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman that we're going to answer this question as follows: that even if you want to say that if you gave the palm tree to one person and the fruits to another, you haven't kept anything back for yourself, and it's called the matanas shlimera. Well, that's makom peri dekel echad. Excuse me, imtim somer deko echad uperos avachar lo ave shiur makom, that you haven't left anything back for yourself, but peri deko echad v'shiur peros of lefanav. So what about the case where? Excuse me, I read this wrong. So Amar Rav Nachman imtim somer deko echad uperos avachar lo ave shiur makom peri. Even if you want to say that in the case where you left the palm tree to one and the fruits to another, you have not considered to have left back the space of the fruits, and there's no shear, and therefore it's considered a gift of a shlimera. What about the case deko echad v'shir perosav lefanav shir makom peri? But in a case where you gave the palm tree to one person and you kept back the fruits for yourself, then you've left over the space of the fruits, and then it's no longer a matana shlimera, because you kept back the space of the fruits, the branches where the fruits grow. And my timer, what's the reasoning? Because we say vis-a-vis yourself. This goes back to a dispute we have earlier in our tractate, that as it relates to yourself, you left it over with an ayin yafa, and so therefore he left over the space of the fruits, not just the fruits, but also the space of the fruits. And so therefore we're going to say He left for himself the space where the fruits can grow, the branches of the tree, because that relates to the dispute we had with Rabbi Akiva earlier. The person who gives away a gift, is he giving it with an ayin yafa or an ayin ras? He left it for himself. So with respect to himself, he left over the space of the fruits. So I'm like Rabbi Abba or Vashi, Anan Adar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Masnisan La. We learn this sugya as it relates to a law of Reish Lakish. The Amar Reish Lakish, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Amnochar Bayis Lechavero v'Amarlo Almanas Shetiyuta Eliona Shali, says, I'm selling to you, I'm selling you the house on the condition that the diuta, the upstairs of the house, the attic of the house belongs to me. Diuta Eliona Shalo. Then obviously the upstairs of the house will belong to him, but he doesn't need to say that because anyways, in those days when you sold a house, you didn't sell the upstairs. So therefore, Reish Lakish said on this, as we'll see in the Gemara, that he must have intended to include something else. And so too, if he says back, and I'm saying it outside first, I'm reading the Gemara, if he he gives the tree to one person and the fruits to himself, he's not just giving himself the fruits, he's giving himself the space of the fruits. And that's why it's not going to be a matana shemira. So that's why in that case, the Gemara said about on the top, I'll read it inside on top of 148b, and he bias if he says the house is to one person and the upstairs is to another person, what will we say in that case? Miavishir or lo? Did he keep for himself the space to use the courtyard? Like he said, if he said the house is for you and the upstairs is for me, he kept for himself the space to use the courtyard for ledges. So what the airspace? What about in this case if he's not keeping the upstairs for himself, but he's giving it to somebody else? And imtim somer bias achar dutela echad bias achar dutela echad lavishir chutz min dutamar. What if he said with the exception? I'm selling you the house with the exception of the attic. So, and in that context, Amar Rav Nachman imtim somer bias achar duti achad lavishir. Even if you want to say the house to one person and the upstairs is to somebody else, you still can't use, you still didn't save the airspace. Chutz mitiyuta, if you say with the exception of the attic, that's avashayur, and that goes according to the position of Rav Zvid, Alibad Rav Zvid, de Amar, Shem Ratza Hotzi Bazizim Motzi, that if he wants to, if he wants to, it goes according to what Rav Zvid said, that if a person sells the house, it doesn't include the upstairs attic. And about this teaching, Reish Lakish said that Rav Zvid was saying that if you want to use the airspace under those circumstances, because you had given this extra phrase, that's what it's coming to teach us. Alma kimin d'shir diutam. So since he left over the attic, he also left over the airspace. And so too in our sugya here, since he left over the fruits for himself when it wasn't necessary to say that, he's also left over the space of the fruits, the branches, which means that the gift of a shlivmar no longer applies. Amar Rav Yosef Bar Minyumi, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Yosef Bar Minyumi says in the name of Rav Nachman, Shlimara shekasav kol mechasav la'acherin. So let's say there's a shlimara who says, I'm giving away all my assets to other people. Rowan, we have to see how he did it. In the mechalik, if basically the people came to him and he gave it all out, then mace, then if he dies, kanu kuan, then they all get all these gifts because he gave them all away. But Ahmad, but since he gave it away all at once, he was a person on a sick bed and he gave away all his gifts, and we called him Matan Shchimera. So Ahmad, if he got healthy and he recovered, choser cool, and they all go back. But in ben nimlach, but let's say he didn't give it all out at once, but basically he gave out some, and then in the end he gave it all out. Then that's considered to be like the first part. It wasn't a shlimera gift. It's only at the end that it's a shlimera gift, because at the first part he only gave out a little bit, and so therefore in ben nimlach, if it's where he kept changing his mind, mace, if he dies, kanu cool. And since he died, everybody gets it because he gave it all to everybody. But Ahmad, but if he recovered, eno choser el ba'achron, the first ones that he gave away, that was a gift. That was a irreversible gift. It's only the last one, which was where he gave away everything, that was a Shlibmara gift, and that's the only part that he gets back. So the Gemara says, but why? Vidilma Yuni Kama Ayin, Mahadar Yaev. Maybe he was just taking his mind to decide. He was looking it all over. Basically, the reason why he was waiting, it was really a Shlimara gift, and he was just thinking about it. The Gemara says, no, That's not how a Shlimara works. A Shlimara gets everybody together, and then he gives it all out, all at once. Amar Rav Acha bar Menyumi, Amar Rav Nachman, Shlimara shekasav. So now we have the following case. A shlimera, another law from Rav Nachman, a shlimera who says, I'm giving all my assets to others. Kol nechasav. The amad, and then he recovered eno choser. He doesn't get them all back. Why? We have to be concerned, even though he listed all of his assets here, we have to be concerned that he has other assets that he didn't list. And so therefore it's a matana b'mikzas, and since it's a matana shlimera b'mikzas, therefore, we're going to say it's an irreversible gift. The Gemara says, well, what about the fact that our masnisin, the katani lo shir karka kolshu, that if he didn't leave over anything, it's not a irreversible gift, it's a shlimera gift. Here also, why don't we say there that maybe he had something overseas, and so therefore it should be an irreversible gift. So what's the case of our Mishnah? So Amar Rav Chama, but Omer kol nechasai. No, it wasn't just that he gave his all assets. He said all of my assets, and so therefore that's a matana shlimera, and therefore it's reversible. Or else, alternatively, Mar Barabashi Amar b'muchza kon deleisli. No, we have a presumption, a presumptive status that he doesn't have anything overseas. So now the Gemara asks the next question. Chazra b'miktas. So now the Gemara's question is as follows. Let's say a person, Shlimera, we're reading from the Rashbam, he wrote all of his assets, let's say, to Ruvain. And he says, I'm giving Ruvain 100% of my assets. And then he says, you know what, I'm going to take half of these assets or 30% of these assets, and I'm going to give them to Shimon. He could do that because we know that a daitiki is mevatel a daitiki. He can uproot it. So now the question is he really uprooting all of the things that he gave to Ruvain? And now Ruvain is left. Let's say he gave 100% to Ruvain, and then he gave 30% to Shimon. Does Ruvain have the other 70%? Or is he going to say that Ruvain has nothing now? And the reason why this is relevant is because, let's say, now what he gave to Shimon is called a matana b'miktas, and therefore, because there's a shiur, there's left over, and so therefore it's an irreversible gift. And then the heirs can come and take out the rest from Ruvain. Or do we say it's not a chazara, and that which he gave to the sheni, the second person got, and whatever he had given to the first person, he remained. And if he gets better, both of them have to return it. So they both have like a stringency and a leniency, because if Shlimero gets better, he gets it all back. Doesn't get better, then it goes all to those people. So therefore, that's the question. Chazar b'miktas have a chazar b'kulo. Is it considered like the first person retains what he has or not? And if the first person retains it, then it's a shlimmer, a gift, and the second person's gift is reversible. So the Gemara says, Tashma, let's cite a brisa, kulan l'rishon, u'miktasan l'sheni. Let's say he gave everything to Ruvain, and then he goes and gives a portion of that to the second person. Sheni kana, the second person receives it, meaning to say, Rishon lo kana, the first person has nothing. So aren't we talking about a case here, Ma'alav b'shameis? Aren't we talking about a case where the first person, where he died, and then we're going to say that since he died, the second person gets the gift because he had left stuff over, and so therefore the first person, it's considered to be like a chazar b'kula, and so therefore it's a irreversible gift, and so the second person got it, and the first person gets nothing. So isn't that what we're talking about? So the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're talking about. Bisha Amad, he got better, and so since he got better, since he completely recovered, we're going to say that So therefore the second person got it because it was a matana b'miktas, and the first person got nothing. But the first person, at first he got everything, basically as a shlimera, is completely canceled because he was a shlimera who got healthy. But the second person was matana b'miktas, and so therefore, since it was a matana b'miktas, so therefore, under those circumstances, he's going to acquire it. So it's not necessarily the case that a matana b'miktas, that a shchumra that return shechazra is not. We still don't know basically how to read it. So the Gemara says, "And hachinami mistar." But indeed, it's logical to say that we're talking about a case where he recovered, and so therefore the first person gets nothing because he recovered from everything, and the second person, it's a matana b'miktas, and so therefore he gets to keep it. So we can't. It's logical to say that. Why? Midiktani saved from the fact that the next clause says miktas and larishon, give a little bit to the first, to the kulan l'sheni, and then everything goes to the second person. Rishon kana, sheni lo kana. The first person has acquired it, and because it wasn't a shlimera gift at that point, and the second person has not acquired it. Now, if you want to say he got healthy, that's why the second person hasn't acquired it, because it's a shlimera who got healthy. If you're saying that they're died, then both of them should acquire it. So it must be they were talking about a case where he got healthy. So I'm like Rav Yemer, Rav Ashi, why? So Rav Yemer says to Rav Ashi, even if he got healthy, the Bryce could be talking about that. Even if he got healthy, we could still bring a proof from the Bryce that if a chazara b'mikdas is considered like you were chazar in all of it. Why? Because iyamris b'shlama chazar b'mikdas ave chazar b'kula. If you want to say that if you return b'mikdas, that's going to be like you completely returned. Hainu desheni miyaskana. That's why the second person acquired it, because he only got a portion of the gifts. And so therefore he doesn't give it back to him. But if you want to say that chazar b'miktas is not a chazar b'kula, so therefore, we should consider like this, like it was a shlimera who gave his assets to several people, and so therefore, when he gets better, none of them should acquire because he recovered, and so therefore, we're going to say chazar b'mitzas chazar b'kua. So the Gemara says the halacha is that if you did a chazar on portion of it, meaning you give your assets to Reuben, and then you said I'm giving Shimon 20% of that, then Reuben gets nothing under those circumstances and cancels out the whole previous gift, and then it becomes like a chazar, like a shlivmera b'mitzas, in which case it's not a reversible gift; it's an irreversible gift. So the Gemara says, and according to this, Reisha, the first clause, where what do we say in the first clause that says the shlimera gave all of his assets to one person, and afterwards he gave a little bit to the other person. And then we're going to say that the second one acquires it and the first one doesn't acquire it. We're going to say mishkachas la bein shemes bein shamad. It works whether or not he died, because even if he died, it's an irreversible gift to the second person, and the first person gets nothing. And also, if he gets healthy, it's the same idea. It's an irreversible gift, and the first person gets nothing. And the seifa and the second clause of the Brisa, which says that if he gave the outset a little bit of his gifts to the first person, and the rest he gave to the second person, that only the first person acquires it. Well, mishkachasla, we only find this case in the case where kishamad, where he got healthy, and so therefore the second person doesn't get anything. But if he indeed died, the second person would have acquired it at that point, and so therefore that's how we have to explain this brisa. So now the Gemara says, let's say a person consecrates all of his assets. He's a shlimera, and he says, I'm giving all my assets to the temple. But then he recovered. Do we say mi amrina? Do the laws of shlimera apply? Do we say kol agave hekdesh gamro mikne? Do we say anything that relates to hekdesh? It's an even greater gift than to a person, and so therefore you intended to completely give it. Odelma kol agabe nafshe lo gamro mikne. Or do we say no, as it relates to himself? He wouldn't have left himself penniless, and so therefore he didn't really intend to give it. It's a shlimmer gift. And if you want to say, and even if you want to say, even if you want to say that a person intends to give it to the hekdesh with a complete heart, even if he recovers, it's a total gift to the temple. Let's say hifkir kol nechasav. Let's say he made all of his assets ownerless. Will we say mi amrin kivin da afla niyam kashirim? Since he's giving it to everyone, the poor and the rich, gamer makni, then he completely gave it over. Odoma kol gabe nafshin gamer makni, or maybe he wouldn't leave himself penniless in that case. And then chila kol nechasav niyamai. Unless he wants to give it all to the poor people while he's on his sick bed. Do we say, I'm reading tzedakah, vadai, migmar, gamar, mikne. Charity, for sure, you intend to completely give it. You don't want any back. Or maybe vis-a-vis as relates to himself, he wouldn't have done this. He wouldn't have left himself penniless. And the Gemara says, Teiku. And the Gemara leaves his questions unresolved. How do we resolve it? So the Shulchan Aruch, there's a dispute amongst the Rishonim, but the Shulchan Aruch says that we assume that you did not intend to give it under those circumstances. Amar Rav Sheishes, let's say the Shchimera used the language of Yitol, take it, Yitzke, Yachzik, V'yikne, meaning to say he doesn't use a language of I'm giving it as a gift. He just says take it, merit it, take a hold of it. Then all of these are Lashon Matana Ein. These are all expressions of a gift, and it's going the laws of a Shchimera apply. But Matnisa Tana. And in the Brisa, we learned af yachasin v'yeras. Even if you use a language of inherit, that will help. And that's beroy yarsha. That's only in a case where somebody is roy. He's in line to inherit, and that follows the position of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. That follows the position of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. The Gemara then says, let's say he says, Yehena bahen. Mahu. Let's say he says, I want these people to benefit from the Nave Kulmatana Kamaris. He's saying, I want the whole thing to be a gift. Odomo is ane minayo midi kamar. Or maybe his intent is to say, maybe his intent is to say that only the person should have benefit from them a little bit, but not really giving it to them. Let's say he says, I want you to be seen in them. Yamod, but meaning to say, what's the intent there? That he wants them to be seen in them as though they're his, or maybe just to be seen in them. That's all he's saying. Yamod b'hema. Let's say he says, I want you to stand in them. Does it mean that he wants them to be his, or meaning to say that you could just use them in a little bit and yisha'en b'hema, or lean upon them? Doesn't mean that you should rely upon them as though they're yours, or rather that you're only able to use them a little bit. So in all these cases, we say we leave the questions unresolved. Shekoyach, this is today's daf. If you have a question, happy to address.